For millions of people, they were the perfect couple. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, the hilarious, loving, and slightly chaotic duo who welcomed us into their apartment every week. They built a television empire on laughter and charm, becoming the undisputed king and queen of comedy. Their on-screen world was a comforting fantasy, a place where any problem could be solved with a clever scheme and a heartfelt, "I love you." But behind the soundstage curtain, a very different story was unfolding. The passion was real, but so was the pain. This is the story of the incredible love and devastating heartbreak that America's sweethearts tried to hide, and the final, poignant words they shared when they thought no one else was listening. That we all know Lucy and Ricky Ricardo. Their antics were a balm for a generation, a picture of a zany but ultimately perfect marriage. But the real-life marriage of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz was anything but a sitcom. It was a story of fierce, all-consuming passion, public humiliation, and a bond so powerful it could survive even the most painful betrayals. For years, they maintained the illusion, selling the world a dream while their own was falling apart. How did it all go so wrong? And how, after all the screaming matches, infidelities, and a bitter divorce, did their story end with a final, whispered confession of love? This is the real story of Lucy and Desi, a love that was far more complicated, and far more human, than the television screen ever revealed. Hollywood, 1940. A 28-year-old Lucille Ball was working hard but feeling stuck. She was a contract player for RKO Pictures, dubbed the Queen of the Bees. She was a stunning redhead with a brilliant mind for comedy, but the breakout role she desperately wanted was always just out of reach. She had fought her way from a tough childhood in Jamestown, New York, to the edge of stardom, but she was starting to wonder if she'd ever make it to the center. That all changed when she was cast in a musical comedy called Too Many Girls. The film brought a force of nature into her life. His name was Desiderio Alberto Arnaz y de Acha 3, or just Desi. He was a 23-year-old Cuban bandleader, a whirlwind of charisma with a rhythm in his soul and fire in his eyes. Desi was everything Lucy wasn't. She was cautious, he was impulsive. He was a refugee whose family had lost everything in the 1933 Cuban Revolution, and he had built a career from scratch, making the conga line a national craze. He was handsome, romantic, and carried an aura of danger that was both terrifying and completely intoxicating. Their first meeting on set wasn't exactly a movie moment. Lucy was in a wild costume from another film and Desi barely noticed her. But when they were properly introduced later, the sparks were undeniable. You could feel the electricity between them. Desi, who never wasted time, walked right up to her and asked if she knew how to rumba. When she said no, he offered to teach her, on one condition: she had to go out with him that night. Lucy usually dated older, taller men, but she found herself captivated by the younger, dynamic Cuban. She said yes. That single date was the beginning of an emotional tidal wave. It was fast, passionate, and completely overwhelming. "I never fell in love with anyone quite so fast," Lucy would later admit. Friends immediately sounded the alarm. Desi already had a reputation as a ladies' man, and they could see the potential for heartbreak. But Lucy was completely smitten. She saw more than a playboy, she saw a partner whose energy and ambition matched her own. In a move that would define their relationship, she decided to ignore the warnings and take a massive gamble. This wasn't just a romance, it was a collision of two stars, creating a gravitational pull that would keep them in its orbit for the rest of their lives. The fire that started on the set of Too Many Girls quickly became an inferno. Just 6 months after they met, on November 30, 1940, Lucy and Desi eloped. It was a shocking, impulsive decision that left friends and colleagues placing bets on how long the turbulent marriage could possibly last. Most guessed it wouldn't be long. They were polar opposites. She was the disciplined professional, he was the untamable performer. As Lucy later wrote, "He disapproved of my moderation and my conservatism. It was like living on top of a volcano, you never knew when it would erupt or why. Those early years were defined by that volcanic energy. Their fights were as legendary and passionate as their reconciliations. But the intensity was made worse by a simple, practical problem: they were never together. Lucille's film career kept her in Hollywood, often needing to be on set before dawn. Desi, as a bandleader, lived on the road, playing nightclubs across the country and finishing his shows in the early hours of the morning. They were newlyweds in a weekend marriage, kept alive by expensive long-distance phone calls. The distance created a breeding ground for suspicion and jealousy. Lucy, alone on their ranch, would read gossip column items about Desi's exploits on the road. His reputation certainly didn't help calm her fears. Desi, for his part, was intensely possessive. He even refused to call her Lucille, a name used by men she'd dated before him, insisting on Lucy, which he felt belonged only to him. But his jealousy didn't extend to his own behavior. By 1944, the cracks were impossible to ignore. Desi was stationed with the army nearby, but being closer didn't fix things. He was frequently seen with other women, and the tabloids had a field day. The public humiliation became too much for Lucy. That year, she filed for divorce for the first time, citing his heavy drinking and infidelities, but even as she took legal steps, she couldn't truly let him go. The divorce was never finalized. They talked, they reconciled, they decided to give it one more shot. They realized their problem wasn't a lack of love, it was a lack of time together. The distance was poison. The only solution, it seemed, was to find a way to bind their professional lives together as tightly as their personal ones. It was a desperate plan, but it would lead them to create something that would not only save their marriage for a time but also change television forever. By the late 1940s, Lucille Ball was a radio star. Her CBS show, My Favorite Husband, was a huge hit, and the network wanted to bring it to the new medium of television. This was the break Lucy had been working for her entire life. But she had one condition, a demand that network executives thought was insane. She insisted that her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, had to be her on-screen husband. The CBS executives flat-out refused. They were scared of the idea. Desi was too foreign, they argued. They believed 1950s America would never accept a sitcom where the all-American redhead was married to a Cuban with a thick accent. But Lucy wouldn't budge. This wasn't just about casting, this was her master plan to save her marriage. As a friend later said, she knew that if he went on the road with the band, he'd be catting around all the time. A TV show was the only way to keep him in one place, working by her side every single day. When the network said no, Lucy and Desi took a huge risk. In 1950, they formed their own company, brilliantly named Desilu, and created a vaudeville-style stage show. They toured the country to prove that their chemistry was not just real, but something audiences would pay to see. The response was overwhelming. People loved the dynamic between the fiery redhead and the charismatic Cuban. The gamble worked. CBS couldn't argue with the ticket sales, and they finally agreed. With the green light, Desilu Productions launched one of the biggest revolutions in TV history. Desi, a sharp businessman, hated the poor quality of early television recordings. Working with legendary cameraman Carl Freund, he pioneered a new method, shooting the show like a film, with 3 cameras at once, in front of a live studio audience. This not only gave the show an incredible energy but also meant that Desilu owned the high-quality 35mm film prints. This move, which seemed like a technical detail at the time, effectively invented the concept of reruns and would make them both astonishingly rich. I Love Lucy premiered in 1951 and became an overnight sensation, rocketing to the #1 show in America. As their professional lives hit an incredible peak, their personal lives seemed to follow. In 1951, their daughter, Lucy Arnaz, was born. 2 years later, in a move that captivated the nation, Lucy's real-life pregnancy was written into the show. At a time when the word pregnant was banned on TV, Lucy proudly showed her baby bump to millions every week. On January 19, 1953, she gave birth to her son, Desi Arnaz Jr. On the exact same day her TV character, Lucy Ricardo, gave birth to little Ricky. It seemed like a fairy tale ending. Their gambit had paid off beyond their wildest dreams. They had a family, a home, and a television empire. Desilu Studios grew into a Hollywood powerhouse, producing other huge hits like Star Trek and Mission Impossible. But the immense pressure of living up to the impossible ideal of Lucy and Ricky was creating new cracks in their foundation. The very thing designed to save their marriage was now threatening to destroy it. While America laughed along with the Ricardos, the Arnaz household was becoming a war zone. The stress of running a massive studio fell heavily on Desi. He was working 14-hour days, not just as a star but as a brilliant, demanding executive. The pressure found an outlet in his old vices. His social drinking spiraled into full-blown alcoholism. The fights at home became more frequent and more vicious. Their daughter, Lucy, later remembered growing up in a home filled with a lot of anger and screaming. The worst poison, however, was Desi's infidelity. In January 1955, his womanizing became a national scandal. The notorious tabloid Confidential magazine ran a cover story with a brutal headline, "Does Desi Really Love Lucy?" The article laid out sordid details of his affairs, claiming he hired prostitutes and sprinkled his affections all over Hollywood. Their publicist, Charles Pomerantz, brought an early copy of the magazine to the set during a rehearsal. The crew held their breath as Lucy took the magazine into her dressing room. When she finally came out, she walked straight to Desi, threw the magazine at him, and said with icy composure, "Oh, hell, I could tell them worse than that." Her public bravado was a mask for her private agony. This wasn't the first she had heard of his affairs, but the Confidential story was a national humiliation. It shattered the illusion of their perfect marriage. Desi reportedly made things worse by telling a friend, "What's she upset about? I don't take out other broads. I just take out hookers." In his own memoir, years later, Desi admitted to his cheating. Their life became a toxic cycle of betrayal, confrontation, and fragile reconciliation. The tension was so thick on set that even Keith Thibodeau, the child actor who played Little Ricky, could feel it. During the filming of one of their final episodes together, Lucy remembered, "My eyes were red from hours of weeping. Whenever I looked at Desi, I could feel my expression hardening. Cold, implacable hate oozed through every pore." The dream had become a prison. The love was still there, somewhere, but it was being suffocated by what she would later call extreme mental cruelty. By 1959, they couldn't fake it anymore. The love that built their empire was now a source of constant pain. Lucy later confessed that she hated the person she had become but couldn't bring herself to be the one to end it. The final push, she wrote, had to come from him. Finally, it did. After one last, terrible fight, Desi asked for a divorce. Lucy's response was immediate. "I had a lawyer in his office in 20 minutes, she wrote. On March 3, 1960, the day she filed the papers, she and Desi were on set filming their very last television episode together. The crew, their family for a decade, knew they were watching the end of an era. The final scene called for Desi to pull Lucy into an embrace and kiss her. As the camera zoomed in, the acting stopped. They looked at each other, and as Desi kissed her, they both started to cry. It marked the end of so many things, Lucy later recalled. When the director yelled, "Cut," they walked to separate dressing rooms, and the greatest partnership in television history was over. The divorce was more than the end of a marriage, it was the end of an empire. In 1962, Lucy made an unprecedented move. She bought out all of Desi's shares in Desilu Productions for $2.5 million. With that, Lucille Ball became the first woman in history to run a major Hollywood studio. It was a stunning display of her resilience and business savvy. She successfully ran the company for several more years before selling it for $17 million in 1967. They moved on. Lucy married comedian Gary Morton in 1961, finding a calm and stable relationship. Desi also remarried and retired from the Hollywood grind. They were no longer husband and wife, but they were still co-parents, grandparents, and inextricably linked. Their daughter, Lucy, said that after the divorce, her parents' lives straightened out, and the constant tension was finally gone. But the powerful, magnetic force that first brought them together never really went away. Even after the divorce, the new marriages, and all the years apart, the bond between Lucy and Desi remained. The painful, volcanic passion cooled into a deep, quiet, and lasting affection. They spoke on the phone regularly, sharing stories about their children and grandchildren. In many ways, they were better friends than they had been husband and wife. The pressure to be Lucy and Ricky was gone, and what was left was a genuine, complicated love. This enduring connection defined their later years. They had built something magnificent together, and even though they couldn't live in it together, they never stopped respecting what they had created. Their shared history was too powerful to simply erase. It was a love that had been tested by fame, addiction, and betrayal, and while the marriage had broken, the core of their connection had not. It had simply transformed into something different, something that would last until the very end. The story of Lucy and Desi did not end with divorce papers. Their connection, forged in fire, endured until Desi's final moments. In November 1986, Desi was dying from lung cancer. Their daughter, Lucy, knowing the end was near, put her mother on the phone. She held the receiver to her father's ear so he could hear Lucy's voice one last time. Barely able to speak, Lucy said the same 3 words, over and over. "I love you," she said. "I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you." Desi, weak but aware, whispered back, "I love you too, honey." No one realized it at the time, but that phone call took place on November 30th, what would have been their 46th wedding anniversary. Desi passed away 2 days later. Their love story was a whirlwind of breathtaking highs and devastating lows. As their daughter Lucy perfectly put it, they gave the country this wonderful creation, but they never got what they wanted, to stay together. And yet, she added, they loved each other until the end. The private tragedy of their marriage can never diminish the public magic they created. They were pioneers who changed an industry, and a force of nature that captured the world's heart. Theirs was a love story that was as messy and painful as it was beautiful and timeless. If you were as moved by this incredible story as we were, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped old Hollywood. Let us know in the comments what you think about Lucy and Desi's complex and powerful love story. Don't forget to like this video and click the notification bell so you never miss an update on the legends of the silver screen.